माता च पिता त्वमेव त्वमेव बन्धुश्च सखा त्वमेव त्वमेव विद्या द्रविणं त्वमेव त्वमेव सर्वं मम देव देव त्वमेव सर्वं मम देव देव त्वमेव सर्वं मम देव देव
So good morning and good evening. Welcome to Sri Aurobindo and Mother's Study Circle. And as we know, we are doing a book study on a compilation by Dr. S Dalal titled Looking from Within. So we have all our training, all our education, all our experiences usually are mostly looking outside, right? Looking outside. And that's why we get so confused as to what's happening. So we all really need to start looking from within. So we are on chapter 2 of the book, and I will screen share it. So we are on section 6. Sin. I think the title is Sin, something not at its right place. We were mid passage. We are to start from basically, but just as an overlap. I think we can start from in another aphorism so that we know what we were talking about, and then we'll continue with basically. So if you can read, you
Yeah.
yeah.
In another, I'll read, Taru. Has anybody joined? I'll read.
Please read. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. In another aphorism, Sri Aurobindo says, I no longer remember his exact words, that sin is merely something which is not in its right place. In this perpetual becoming, nothing ever repeats itself, and there are things that disappear, so to speak, into the past. And when their disappearance becomes necessary, these things become, for our very limited consciousness, bad and repulsive, and we revolt against them because their time is over. But if we had the overall view, if we could contain within ourselves the past, the present, and the future all at once, as it is somewhere above, we would see the relativity of these things, and that is that it is above all the progressive force of evolution that gives us the will to reject, and that wherever they are in their right place, they are quite acceptable. Only it is practically impossible to have this experience unless you have the total vision. That is to say, the vision that belongs to the Supreme alone. Therefore, you must first of all identify yourself with the Supreme. Then, afterwards, with this identification, you can return to a sufficiently exteriorized consciousness and see things as they are. But That is the principle. And to the extent that you are capable of realizing it, you reach a state of consciousness where you can look at everything with a smile of total certitude that everything is as it should be. So, Taru, can you just scroll a bit more? Yeah. The sin, and this sentence, can you explain to me? That sin is merely something which is not in its right place. In this perpetual becoming, nothing ever repeats itself, and there are things that disappear, so to speak, into the past. What does this mean, Taru? Maybe we have discussed last week, but
Yeah, so it's a bit confusing. So good that we are repeating it. So,
Mm.
firstly, we have shared this in the beginning only, where mother says, na, okay, I don't remember
Mm.
exactly what Sri Aurobindo says.
Mhm.
So, sin,
Mm.
a thing not in its right place. That's exactly
Mm.
what he had said. So,
Okay.
okay, so just taking over this thing now, what we
Mm.
just said, sorry. Yeah, it says that, where is it? Yeah, sorry. That sin is merely something which is not in its right place, right? Like what I may call as sin or what I may call as error or something that's going wrong. So that's not like there's nothing called sin, like something that sin is something we say. When I say the word sin, let's start with that. What comes to you? You're on mute, Sartaji.
Yeah, some bad deed.
Yeah, like something that should absolutely not be happening, right? Sin in
Yeah.
itself is a very
Mm.
powerful word, right? We don't use
Mm.
this word often.
Yeah.
So if we use this word, that means something drastically
Yeah.
bad has happened, right?
Yeah.
So we are told that everything has a place, like something which is drastically bad for you right now, what appears to be bad, there
Mm.
would be a place for that also. Say, for
Oh.
example, something that
Mm.
came to me when you were reading it is say about the sati pratha, right? The sati
Mm.
movement.
Mm. Mm.
It's my understanding that initially the state of affairs, especially in some villages and all, was so bad that the woman actually would not want to stay alive once the husband is has left the
No.
body, right? Like it was a
Mm.
willing gesture that I would rather die than stay on my own. Either it could be that's how the society was, that there was no place for it, or how women are sometimes considered to be have the ability of total surrender,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm.
initially, how that's how I've read it, that the birth of women was basically to serve. That's how it was
Yeah.
conceived, right? That you are there to serve, you're there to serve. So it was like you are nothing and you are just born to serve. So that was in the evolutionary cycle, that too was a role, right? So
Yeah.
if out of that surrender, if you cannot see anything beyond the person who has left and you're offering yourself to the fire, that
Mm.
could be a very beautiful and expansive act of ultimate surrender, right? But when
True.
it became a rule, like if today, if I'm say talking to somebody, especially a Westerner, and if I tell them, oh, it's an act of absolute surrender, they'll be like, have you lost your mind, right? Like, what could be worse than a person actually burning alive, right? So if you look at this example, when it was actually abolished, it was a sin, right? Like a sin was stopped, and people had to work really hard. Actually, it was a British person, one of them, who realized, who had the power to stop it. Otherwise, there were quite uprisings which were stopped because the people of the community themselves thought that it was such a pious thing, a pious process. Why should it be stopped? So similarly, when I see, especially in northern India, there's so many practices. If we look at all our, I want to say all, I think there might be some exceptions, are religious ceremonies. They are like a torture to the environment, right? Like I would say each and every one, every religious ceremony, but I'm sure there would be exceptions. But the ones that we celebrate lavishly, right? But because the religious aspect in India is so much on the name of democracy, we say, no, 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 let this religion do what they are doing and everything. But that's actually a sin that is happening now on the environment. And yet we are allowing it to continue, right? Like just challenging our definitions of this is beautiful, this is right, like say on the name of Diwali, Christmas, so much consumerism, right? This Diwali for most people just means gift exchanges, mostly. Especially I'm talking about North, where I know of, right? Like so here also, in Canada, there's a Santa parade, I was told, very elaborate with big floaters. And I was told it will happen, say, in mid-November. And I was like, why will Santa parade happen in mid-November? And they were like some of the people started laughing. They said, because, it's a kickstart of buying gifts. People come, they do the parade in the downtown so that you have the shops, then you start,
I
purchasing stuff. So that's how it is. So just what's happening at the name of what? So sorry, I'm digressing, but something that is not at its right place, first of all, that is sin. And the second aspect that you were confused about, it's basically how the evolution has happened, right? Like again, looking at Sati Pratha, in the past, if we look where it started, when it was a self-offering,
mm,
then nobody can say it's wrong, right? Like
yeah.
if you actually want to do it out of the love you're feeling, the surrender you're feeling, nobody can stop you. I mean, there are people who will stop you. I mean, today if somebody wants to do it. But if you imagine in what state it was done, it doesn't appear to be a sin. And then how it slowly became like a rule, and then you had no choice, and women were pushed into the fire, right? So if we just see the bigger picture of past, present, future, how everything has a purpose, he's saying nothing would appear to us as sin. But then
Mm,
he followed it by, like sorry, mother is saying, na? So mother said, but that vision only the Supreme has. So right now, because I cannot know how it started for most of things, the true intention, what's happening right now, maybe I can see, and I don't know what purpose it's meant to serve, right? So that vision only the Supreme has, but I can have the faith that everything is happening towards something bigger, right? Like so many wars are happening, like, I don't know too much, but of course they are happening. And how I was listening to a talk by Alok recently, and he was saying that how Sri Aurobindo has said that there would be wars because war is what will take us towards the higher evolution. We need that churning, we need that thing. And then he said that the final war, the biggest war, will happen in India, he said. And he said that's a inside war, that we have to choose the good over evil, we'll have to choose the higher over lower. And if we don't do that, then human evolution will actually digress out, I don't know how many years, and pralay will have to happen. But he followed it by saying that mother had assured that that would not happen, like we will have the tools to choose the higher. But that is so, in the sense, how we say war, bad. But here,
yeah.
war, good. How like our definitions are limited. So that is, I think, so in that light, this is to expand on that. So if you want to read it again, it might make more sense, and Ritu will can also get the overlap.
So I'll read. That sin is merely something which is not in its right place. Yeah, now it makes sense. Yeah. In this perpetual becoming, nothing ever repeats itself, and there are things that disappear, so to speak, into the past. And when their disappearance becomes necessary, these things become, for our very limited consciousness, bad or repulsive. And we revolt against them because their time is over. But if we had the overall view, if we could contain within ourselves the past, the present, and future all at once, as it is somewhere above, we would see the relativity of these things, and that is that it is above all the progressive force of evolution that gives us the will to reject, and that whatever they are in their right place, they are quite acceptable. Only it is practically impossible to have this experience unless you have the total vision, that is to say, the vision that belongs to the Supreme alone. Therefore, you must first of all identify yourself with the Supreme. Then, afterwards, with this identification, you can see things as they are. But that is the principle, and to the extent that you are capable of realizing it, you reach a state of consciousness where you can look at everything with a smile of total certitude that everything is as it should be. Beautiful.
So, because I cannot have the vision of past, present, and future simultaneously, because I cannot grasp or see things for how they are, and I see
Mm.
limited, right? And in Savitri also, I don't remember exactly, but Jagan the other day was sharing, I think from book 1, Canto 3, that how one can only see the arc of things. We feel we are seeing the whole circle, but we are just, this is our capacity, our capability in this body with this limited mind is to see small arcs. And our lives are lived, all our opinions are based on those small arcs. So because knowing my limitation, the limitation of my brain, my mind, my identity, I can, to the extent I can believe this, have faith in this, that yes, everything is as it should be. I can at least, because I cannot have that vision, I can reach but a consciousness where I can look at everything with a smile of total certitude that everything is as it should be. So this is the main takeaway I feel for us, especially at, where at least I can talk about myself to have that faith. And in the Friday study circle, we were talking about, we were reading a passage on fear. And mother was saying that fear is there because there is ego. And then she gave three further explanations. The third being that one of the major reasons why we are scared is because there is not a spontaneous trust on divine. By grace of God, we can reach it now, right? We will analyze, we will ask, we will question, we'll push ourselves, and we'll say, no, I must have faith. But in that, we are seeing the fears, right? We are insecure, we feel this or that. What if this happens? What if that happens? And then we say, no, no, mother will take care, for example. But if there was a spontaneous faith, why would one even entertain fear if there's a spontaneous faith that, like it says, total certitude that everything as it should be? So, yeah, like that should be enough. So, that was, basically a recap from last time. And we'll start with this. So, we can read the first passage, first paragraph, starting from basics. So if Ritu can read, she can read. Otherwise,
Yes. Basically, disgust, revolt, anger, all these movements of violence are necessarily movements of ignorance and limitation, with all the weakness that limitation represents. Revolt is a weakness, It is the feeling of an impotent will. You will, or think you will, you feel, you see that things are not as they should be, and you revolt against whatever does not agree with what you see. But if you were all powerful, if your will and your vision were all powerful, there would be no occasion for you to revolt. You would always see that all things are as they should be. If we go to the highest level and unite with the consciousness of the Supreme Will, we see at every second, at every moment of the universe, that all is exactly as it should be, exactly as the Supreme Will is, exactly as the Supreme wills it. That is omnipotence. And all movements of violence become not only necessary but utterly ridiculous. Therefore, there is only one solution: to unite ourselves by aspiration, concentration, interiorization, and identification with the Supreme Will. And that is both omnipotence and perfect freedom at the same time. And that is the only omnipotence and the only freedom. Everything else is an approximation. You may be on the way, but it is not the entire thing. So if you experience this, you realize that with this supreme freedom and supreme power, there is also a total peace and serenity that never fails. Therefore, if you feel something which is not that, a revolt, a disgust, something which you cannot accept, it means that in you there is a part which has not been touched by the transformation, something which has kept the old consciousness, something which is still on the path. That is all, the mother.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting and very different from how what we usually get read. So let's go through it again because, yeah. So, anything would you like to say, Ritu, on this, or should we take it up line by line?
Yeah, sometimes it's confusing, because in the earlier paragraph, it said that even a war is good and even a revolt is good. Because if we look at the complete picture, then even a war is good in the bigger picture and a revolt is good in the bigger picture. Even last week, what we were reading, standing against the truth, I mean, standing for the truth, fighting when it's necessary is also good. So here it says that if we are not in the right place, then only we will revolt or get angry or, um, I mean, react.
Yeah,
But then, like we discussed last time, I think everything is necessary when it's needed.
yeah.
Like sometimes a revolt is also needed, and sometimes lying low is also needed.
Mm. Yeah, I think one thing to remember, I mean, I totally agree with what you are saying. I think one thing that is coming to me is firstly, who is this said to, right? There's a context of where these things would be said. Who has asked the question, what is his consciousness? Where is he standing, right? So and like we were just reading that sin is something that is not at its right place. And for us, each of us have a right place, a right con a consciousness which is born to do something specific, right? So, like, say, for example, if you talk about Krishna, right? Arjun and Krishna is telling Arjun that Arjun, you fight. That is what you're born for. That is the dharma, right? So, for there, that was needed. But say, for example, something happens and there needs to be a revolt. And yet, say, if Buddha is there, he would just sit there smiling because he can see that how everything has a purpose, but that revolt would be needed for something else because I cannot accept things for what they are. And that revolt is needed for that evolution for where I need to be. So, depending on where you are, the same thing would feel fine and the same thing would feel unacceptable. Like that's one of the things that was coming to me. So if just we take it line by line, so mother says basically disgust, revolt, anger, all these movements of violence. So first of all, just to make sure that we fully understand it, she's calling disgust. I'm disgusted with myself, with somebody else, revolt. I'm going against or anger. These three movements, she's saying, are the movements of violence, are necessarily movements of ignorance and limitation, with all the weakness that limitation represents. So, again, depending on where one is, these could be movements of what is necessary. And yet, if one has transcended a certain state, these would become weak, movements of ignorance. Revolt is a weakness. It is a feeling of an impotent will. So the will which is not really there. You will or you think you will, you feel, you see that things are not as they should be, and you revolt against whatever does not agree with what you see. You have a vision, and when things are not complying with that, you revolt. But if you were all powerful, so again, here in all powerful, I don't think it means like just physical power. I think Mother is talking about the highest state of consciousness, maybe, and I'm just extrapolating. If your will and your vision were all powerful, there would be no occasion for you to revolt. You would always see that all things are as they should be. If we go to the highest level and unite with the consciousness of the Supreme Will, we see at every second, at every moment of the universe, that all is exactly as it should be, exactly as the Supreme wills it. That is omnipotence. Omnipotence is like, all powerful. That is the power. And all movements of violence become not only unnecessary, but utterly ridiculous. Another thing that came to me right now, just rereading it, it's like, how we had that Krishna story that when they had Krishna with one of his friends, they had gone on the other side of Yamuna to eat something, and Krishna just kept eating and eating and eating and eating. And the friend had to go back, but there was a flood in the river. I'm sure you've heard the story. So the friend could not cross. So he came back and he told Krishna that, I couldn't go and I really have to. So Krishna said that, you stand in front of the river and you say that the one who has not eaten anything is commanding that you give way to me. So he goes, and first of all, he's like, what are you talking about? Like, you've eaten so much, and you're saying the one who hasn't eaten. So, but he said, no, no, go, you do it. So he went, he had faith in Krishna, he said that, and the river gave way. And I think the same thing later on repeated that, Krishna had so many wives. And I think his son said that the one who hasn't touched a woman, for example, is saying that do this, and again that happened. So, it was about the doership of things, that how they say that yes, one can show anger, but don't be angry. Okay, kill, but there's no violence in killing. I mean, it sounds quite counterintuitive of contradictory to how we take things when we talk about killing, when we talk about fighting. It's done it appears that there would be so much violence, disgust, anger, revolt in it, and yet these things can also be done without those violent, violent emotions. Like, Arjuna was directed in the war that you just do it as your dharma. So, again, just something that came to me, and there would be so many other things of ways of looking at it. So there could be a state in which you would be able to see that all the movements of violence become not only unnecessary, but utterly ridiculous. Therefore, there is only one solution: to unite ourselves by aspiration, concentration, interiorization, and identification with the Supreme Will. And that is both omnipotent and perfect freedom at the same time. So here it means, coming in touch with the psychic, realizing the psychic, because that is the divine will, right? That's why to every question, when some higher people with higher consciousness, when they have asked mother what to do, this is the issue, this is where I'm stuck, her answer is always like, realize your psychic, because psychic is the divine spark in me. So if I am able to realize that, open myself to that, if psychic take control of our being, then I will know what the supreme will is. And that would be both power and freedom, unlimited power, perfect freedom at the same time. And that is the only omnipotence and the only freedom. Everything else is an approximation that I'm trying, I'm close to it. But once I'm able to identify with the supreme will, realize the supreme will, that is perfect omnipotence and perfect freedom. Mother says you may be on the way, but it is not the entire thing. So if you experience this, you realize that with this supreme freedom and supreme power, there is also a total peace and a serenity that never fails. You know how they say with power comes responsibility, like a dialogue of Spider-Man. And supreme power can usually how we see power, right? How people in power behave. But for supreme freedom and supreme power, there is a total peace and a serenity that never fails. So therefore, if you feel something which is not that, a revolt, a disgust, so if you feel something which is not total peace, serenity, if it is a revolt, a disgust, something which you cannot accept, it means that in you there is a part which has not been touched by the transformation. So, if something is upsetting us, if something is taking our inner peace, so that means some part of us has not been touched by the transformation, of course. Something which has kept the old consciousness, something which is still on the path, that is also, especially from this last sentence again, we can, as see that mother is talking to somebody with a very realized consciousness, because she's saying that if you see this, that means something of the old you have still kept. Again, what the two were saying, I agree with that it seems a bit contradictory, but again, who it was said to, with what context, would have added more thing. And I think it's a very big passage. We have just read the last part of it. Yes. So feel free to please unmute and reflect more on this so that we can together shed more light. Yeah. So is nothing else because it is a bit to a different context. We can start with number 7 today, helping others. Yeah, if somebody is willing, they can read this passage and we'll take it up.
Yeah, I'll read. Helping others, each one, this totality of substance constituting your inner and outer body, the totality of substance with which your being is built from the outermost to the innermost, is a field of work. It is as though one had gathered together, carefully accumulated a certain number of vibrations and put them at your disposal for you to work upon them fully. It is like a field of action constantly at your disposal, night and day, waking or sleeping, all the time. Nobody can take it away from you. It is wonderful. You may refuse to use it, as most men do, but it is a mass to be transformed that is there in your hands, fully at your disposal, given to you for you to learn to work upon it. So, the most important thing is to begin by doing that. You can do nothing with others unless you are able to do it with yourself. You can never give a good advice to anyone unless you are able to give it to yourself first and to follow it. And if you see a difficulty somewhere, the best way of changing this difficulty is to change it in yourself first. If you see a defect in anyone, you may be sure it is in you, and you begin to change it in yourself. And when you will have changed it in yourself, you will be strong enough to change it in others. And this is a wonderful thing. People don't realize what an infinite grace it is that this universe is arranged in such a way that there is a collection of substance from the most material to the highest spiritual, all that gather together into what is called a small individual, but at the disposal of a central will. And that is yours, your field of work. Nobody can take it away from you. It is your own property. And to the extent you can work upon it, you will be able to have an action upon the world. But only to that extent. One must do more for oneself besides than one does for others. The mother.
Thank you. So the section is helping others. So mother starts by talking about how, and we had read about it in the beginning, in the introduction of this compilation, about the outer being, the inner being, and the inmost being. From, say, the conscious, the subconscious, and the divine, the subtle. So each one, this totality of substance constituting your inner and outer body. That how, even we talk about, different koshas, right? Anmay kosh, pranmay kosh, gyanmay kosh, vigyanmay kosh. So this totality of substance with which your being is built, from outermost to the inmost. It's so interesting that we have read this so many times. And we know it is true. We know that how there's so many different parts in me. Yet, and I am, most of us are usually quite curious. We want to know, we want to gain knowledge. And yet, we are very okay just knowing, personally, practically experiencing just the outermost being. We don't mostly put a lot of effort on the innermost, the inmost being. That's very surprising that it doesn't catches our fancy to do that. But sticking to what Mother is saying right now, the totality of substance with which your being is built from the outermost to the inmost is a field of work. It is as though one has gathered together carefully, accumulated a certain number of vibrations, and put them at your disposal for you to work upon them fully. We say we get bored, we say, I want to do this, I want to go here, I want to see that movie, I want to go to that restaurant, because we want new things to do. We feel otherwise life is too monotonous. And it's a joke, really, that if we look at it from this angle, so much work to do, so much, so much, so much, that, and it seems so, I don't know, out of reach, or how we have come so far that we don't even know that this is our work. So it's as if somebody has put at our disposal for us to work through these layers, to know the outer, the inner. Yes, Ritu. Okay. So it is like a field of action constantly at your disposal, night and day, waking or asleep, all the time. Nobody can take it away from you. It is wonderful. So when we are sleeping, we might be using, we will be using a different part of our being. If we are dreaming, different. If we are in deep sleep, different. Waking, different. What we are doing when we are waking, it would be different. You may refuse to use it, as most of us do, but it is a mass to be transformed that is there in your hands, fully at your disposal, given to you for you to learn to work upon it. So powerful that so much we have to do, we can do if we want to do. So the most important thing is to begin by doing that. If I really want to do, we are always looking for things to do, chores, big, small, in the name of cleanliness, maintenance, renovations, refurbing, if that's a word. So Mother says, so the most important thing is to begin by doing that. You can do nothing with others unless you're able to do it with yourself. You can never give a good advice to anyone unless you're able to give it to yourself first and to follow it. So if someone wants to help others, Mother is saying you can do nothing with others unless you're able to do it with yourself. And if you see a difficulty somewhere, the best way of changing this difficulty is to change it in yourself first, right? Because it is said again and again, difficult for us to fully understand, and yet if we see it very clearly, that if you see a defect in anyone, you may be sure it is in you, and you begin to change it in yourself. So if you see something in someone and you feel it's a defect, this is something that needs to be changed, I can be 100% sure, not 99, but 100% sure that I too will have that defect, that weakness that I am seeing. Unless without that, I'll be able to not even recognize it. So if we can just shift the focus from outside that the other has this defect to inside that do I have this defect? And when I look at it, I will find it for sure. So if you see a defect in anyone, you may be sure it is in you, and you begin to change it in yourself. And when you will have changed it in yourself, you will be strong enough to change it in others. And time doesn't even have to say things. If it has changed for you, the people who will come in touch with you, you are oozing that vibration, that essence, and a lot of us get motivated by that. And I think that is why the auras, the physical presence of mystics, the learned people with higher consciousness who are able to attain more than regular human beings, how their presence, to be in their presence, feels so that if there's more possibility, it feels expansive. And this is a wonderful thing. People don't realize what an infinite grace it is that this universe is arranged in such a way that there is a collection of substance from the most material to the highest spiritual, all that gathered together into what is called a small individual. You know, Firstly, this whole thing, it might sound complicated, right? Oh, you see something, look it in yourself. You first have to change it in yourself, then you can help others. If you see a defect, look for it in yourself. You can transcend it. It seems like too much work, right? But here she's reassuring, I think, and this is a wonderful thing that if you can see, then you can work, then you can correct. People don't realize what an infinite grace it is that this universe is arranged in such a way that there is a collection of substance from the most material to the highest spiritual, all that gather together in me, right? The most material, the highest spiritual gathered in me and at the disposal of a central will. But if I am not in touch with the central will, I would not be able to access, control, see, experience consciously these different parts that I am made of, these collection of substance. And that is yours, your field of work. So it's my field of work to get in touch with the central will. Nobody can take it away from you. It is your own property. And to the extent you can work upon it, you will be able to have an action upon the world, but only to that extent. So to the extent I can work upon it, I will be able to have an action upon the world, but only to that extent. One must do more for oneself besides than one does for others. So if I change something in me, that's something that I'm doing. You know how it is said that if you be one drop of poison less, if I am able to transcend something, some lower habit, some action, something that I know is not good for me, if I'm able to transmute it, transcend it, I'm doing it for the whole consciousness. I think it's such a big thing. It's hard for us to even accept it or to fully know it. That whatever I'm correcting in myself, whenever I'm choosing the higher, I'm doing it for everyone. I'm taking the whole consciousness forward. It's such a subtle thing, we don't get it. But it's beautiful to read it again. And this brings us to this thing that all the work is for me, within me. Lot of my focus is about advising, guiding, correcting, again, accusing, complaining, while the work that needs to be done is in me. I had shared it in the morning too, that there is this beautiful thing that mother had once said, and it was about vigilance. And she had said that, true vigilance is not just stopping ourselves from falling down, but one must be alert and one must never lose any chance for progress. Any chance, one should never miss any opportunity to resist the temptation. One must not you lose any opportunity to master something, to change something in yourself. And how we take things so casually, right? We know, okay, we have this issue, this is where we go wrong, this is where I lose it. And this is where, in the same situation, I've lost it so many times. But I don't work on myself, I want the others to change. Once we are able to change, we are able to laugh at ourselves that, oh my God, was I really that, childish maybe? Or I couldn't really see it that it was for me to change. But it's so easy, right, to blame universe, circumstances, people, than to work on ourselves. But once we are able to do it, we are able to do it. So yeah. So inviting reflections, questions, and I think we should read this whole thing once again just to fully take it in. Yeah, but before that, please unmute and be good if we can see if there's something that wasn't clear. Okay, so if anybody would want to read it again, maybe then we'll have something to add or question, or we can end the session. But we can just read this one. We still have a few minutes. Helping others.
Yeah, Tara, I would like to read.
Okay, please, thank you.
Yeah. This totality of substance constituting your inner and outer body, the totality of substance with which your being is built from the outermost to the inmost, is a field of work. It is as though one had gathered together carefully, accumulated a certain number of vibrations and put them at your disposal for you to work upon them fully. It is like a field of action constantly at your disposal. Night and day, waking or asleep, all the time. Nobody can take it away from you. It is wonderful. You may refuse to use it, as most men do, but it is a mass to be transformed that is there in your hands, fully at your disposal, given to you for you to learn to work upon it. So, the most important thing is to begin by doing that. You can do nothing with others unless you are able to do it with yourself. You can never give a good advice to anyone unless you are able to give it to yourself first and to follow it. And if you see a difficulty somewhere, the best way of changing this difficulty is to change it in yourself first. If you see a defect in anyone, you may be sure it is in you. And you begin to change in it, you begin to change it in yourself. And when you will have change, when you will have changed it in yourself, you will be strong enough to change it in others. And this is a wonderful thing. People don't realize what an infinite grace it is that this universe is arranged in such a way that there is a collection of substance from the most material to the highest spiritual, all that gathered together into what is called a small individual, but at the disposal of a central will. And that is yours, your field of work. Nobody can take it away from you. It is your own property. And to the extent you can work upon it, you will be able to have an action upon the world. But only to that extent, one must do more for oneself besides than one does for others. But mostly we would like to correct the world, the others, the people next to us. It's a very good advice from the mother. Beautiful.
You know that song, I was recalling that song that in Hindi, it's a movie song where it says that, you know, हमको मन की शक्ति देना, मन विजय करें, दूसरों की जय से पहले खुद को जय करें. So, you know, a lot of times we feel there's so much to be corrected about the world. But Mother is saying that if I correct, if my energy, my focus, my aspiration, my will is to connect with the central will, is to correct my movements, is to resist my temptations, if it is to know myself more and more and more, that is much higher. That is a much higher work than trying to help anyone. That which I usually try, and the ego feels really good when I do that. So, yeah, very revelatory and again pointing at the right direction. Again, so many questions, you know, can stem from this that, and should we not help? Should we just become, you know, self-centered? Because our definition of self-centered is very different than what ideally it should be. I think we all know we can choose what we want to. And yeah, but the more we focus on our growth and progress, letting go, living light, you know, this is what we call maturity too, right? That a 5-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 70-year-old with maturity, hopefully they don't react that much to small, you know, the same things that one reacts in the lower age a lot of time. The grievances, the reactions, mostly they go lower, they go that's all right, that's all right. And at least that's what we expect in an elderly who has seen life, who has seen that not everything is a matter of big drama. So, yeah. So we will end here today. Again, there might be some things which would not be clear, but taking whatever we can take. Yes, please, somebody had, I think, unmuted. I was looking at the sheet.
Yeah, Vataru, it's me. So, just in connection with what we read, Meera was doing an exercise, you know. So, she was, you know, find find out qualities which you want to be in others. So, in a good, with a good friend. So the list was coming, you know, like 10, 20. So the next part of the exercise, how many of that quality which you have in yourself? So you want others to be having all the qualities. loving, compassionate, patient, and whatever. But then when the next part came, we both, we were stuck in that exercise. That time we realized how much we expect in others, which we ourselves don't have. That was really beautiful to, find out. So, just as mother written, most of the qualities we don't have in ourselves, and we expect the world to have.
Yeah. There's
It was
another
very.
catch here, I think. How say if I'm talking about my best friend, right? For example, and if I
Mm,
talk about the qualities, I might be, and I think I would be very patient towards her. I would be very
mm,
kind towards her. I would be very expansive, open towards her. And yet I would not be the same in a lot of other relationships, right? Like
yeah,
we
that
are very
also. Mm,
divided. So I think having once when we have recognized, like say from exercises like this, to also
mm,
have this aspiration and the consciousness that how it's divided in me, right? And I can
yeah,
have possibly the same openness, the same generosity, the same space for everyone. But for us, it's very divided. It's very difficult to have that uniformity because there's so many stories, right? This, that, he did this, she did this. How can I be okay with her? So it just complicates a lot of things, and all these complications are self-created because we are just holding on to too much. Mm. Yeah. So we'll end the session here. Just two small passages are left. After that, we'll begin chapter 3. That would be wonderful. Yeah, so thanking Grace, thanking the Divine for this session, for these words, these forces in action, aspiring for opening to receive this so that more in me can be corrected and move towards the highest that I can do. I might not understand everything, a lot of it might not make sense. And yet, knowing that, whatever is needed will come to me when it's needed, having that faith and certitude, so having a goodwill and praying and aspiring for the highest for everybody in the universe. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.